Hi.
I have a
All right.
headset on, so I don't.
Okay.
He's 80.
That's cool. Up on the screen, it says live on YouTube. I love it.
All right. It says it's still setting it up, so hopefully we'll. And then we're gonna go.
Together.
Let me know.
I should put out.
There we go.
Ooh, look at that hair. Whew.
All right. I think we're ready to go. Okay. Everybody hear me?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to put up the mimer on in a moment, just to give it a little bit of a overview of what we've been learning until now, and then we'll put the mimer up so you can follow along inside. Okay. So the discussion of the mimer. Ooh, I'm going to put everybody on mute because there's a what's the thing? That's better now. Okay, thanks, fine. So if you want to just unmute yourself on asking questions, go right ahead. Okay, so the Mimer's talking about the greatness of Mashiach, and specifically talking about two areas of Mashiach, about himself and about his influence, his leadership in the world. And what we studied is there's him, that Hashem is going to give, that Venacha l'ruach Hashem is going to be the spirit of Hashem on him. And then we talk about the leadership and the influence that he's going to have on the world. And that is that first of all, he's going to be able to judge people, not through witnesses and everything. He'll be able to judge them through the scent of his nose. Hashem, that he'll have the scent of the fear of Hashem. And the rabbis say that means that he'll be able to be meirach b'doyin, to be able to judge people but just by his scent, as well as he's not just going to influence humans, he's also going to influence the animals. And that's Vigarza even Keves, that the sheep will lie with the lamb. The wolf will lie with the lamb. And not only that, it'll even influence the very earth, the very inanimate. As it concludes, Hashem, that the earth itself will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem. So that's the impact of Mashiach on the world, is not just going to impact humans, also going to impact the animals until in the inanimate itself, until the rocks and the stones, as we learn in other places that if a person was going to want to do something in against the Torah, the earth itself, the stone itself will say, "I am not kosher. Don't do it, or don't eat me," or whatever it is. So the Rebbe asks a question like this. If Mashiach is going to have such a strong influence on the world, that the whole world is going to be so full of the knowledge of Hashem, and the light of Hashem is going to be so much obvious in the world. So what do we need a king for? It's King Mashiach. What do we need a king for? Why do we need a king? The job of a king is to make sure there's law and order and people are following what you're supposed to do. But if everybody's going to recognize Hashem, so what do we need a king for? What's his job? And for this, the Rebbe explains that a king is different than a teacher. When a teacher teaches, he has to connect with the student. He has to make it relevant to the student. And if not, he's not doing his job. In other words, whatever he says to the student has to be understood by him, has to relate to the student. It has to, it has to touch the student. A king, on the other hand, has a whole different way of dealing with his subjects. Number one, a king, by definition, a real true king is head and shoulders above the nation. Like we say about King Shaul, that his head and shoulders were above the rest of the people. What does that mean? That I guess that even his emotional IQ was higher than the average person's intellectual IQ. That's how high he was from the people. He was head and shoulders above the rest, not just in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. So a king is much, much greater than the people. But at the same time, right, he has to lead the people. So how does he do it? He doesn't do it by explaining himself. He doesn't do it by making it relatable to the people. When he decides something, then he commands it. It's a commandment. It's a decree. It's, you like it or not, you got to do this. So number one, a king is head and shoulders above the people. He's muvdal, he's separate from the people. And number two is even the way he interacts with the people is in a way of aloofness. So the Rebbe explains that's going to be the job of Mashiach as a king. The job of Mashiach as a king is to draw down into the people, is to bring an experience of godliness to the people, which completely transcends their abilities, their intellect, their emotions. It's going to be it's going to be a drawing down of Hashem's light, which is beyond our knowledge, beyond our understanding. As he says, even beyond our seeing. The highest level of understanding is being able to see with our minds. Even that is to be so much greater than that he can't explain it to us. It will be in a way of makif. It will be in a way of a transcendent experience of godliness. Because as a king, he's going to be much, much greater than all of us. And the way he's going to draw down that light is in a way that's greater than all of us. So he's going to give us a transcendent experience of godliness. What's called again makif, surrounding. It's going to surround us. It's going to be above and beyond us. But at the same time, Mashiach is also going to be a Rav. He's going to be a Melech, which means a king. He's also going to be a Rav, which means a teacher. Because he's going to teach us as well. Meaning that he's also going to teach us things that are relevant. He's going to draw down into us godliness, things that are relatable to us, that we can understand, that we can relate to. He's going to also give that to us. As the way a teacher gives a student, both of these things Mashiach is going to give. So in other words, on the one hand, we're going to start experience godliness in a way which transcends completely the way we can relate to Hashem today, because Mashiach is going to give it to us in a way of a king. And at the same time, what we could understand, what we could appreciate of godliness, what we could know about Hashem, Mashiach is going to give us a much greater understanding, a much greater understanding of Hashem. And these are the two functions that Mashiach is going to give us. Number one, again, is a transcendent experience of godliness. And number two, he's going to elevate our internal relationship, our understanding of godliness. So the Rebbe then says like this: how do we get to this? How do we get to this when Mashiach comes? It's through what we do today in exile. When we prepare ourselves today in exile, that's the way we're going to experience this when Mashiach comes. What does that mean? So the Rebbe says, first explains like what he says in the Maimer. And the Maimer, he says that in today's day and age, the main way of serving Hashem is with Netzach. Netzach, as we explained in previous classes, means determination. Netzach means victory. It's that nature that people have, that they have to be victorious no matter what. They have to win. Many people are like that. They have to win. Competitiveness in sports, of course, you have it. It's a very big subject. Equality in sports is being competitive. You go out in the field and you want to win, because that determination, that wanting to win, gives you an edge, as opposed to the person who okay, I win, I don't win, what's the big deal? I just have fun, right? If you want to win, it gives you that edge of actually getting to that win. That's the netzach, that's victory, that's competitiveness. But where does it come from? It's mesiras. The Rebbe says it's mesiras nefesh. It's like giving one's life for Hashem, higher than reason, higher than understanding. It's stubbornness. It's a stubbornness which is beyond reason. I got to do it, and no matter what. And the way that the Rebbe puts it is the definition of mesiras nefesh means. What does self-sacrifice mean? That I have no other option. Self-sacrifice means there's no other option. So again, when somebody comes and threatens a Jew's life and says, either you bow down to an idol or I'm going to shoot you, God forbid, right? What does the Jew say? He gives his life for Hashem. Why? Not because he started meditating and he started understanding the greatness of Hashem and he started recognizing how unworthy it is to live with bowing down to idols. That's not what's going through this guy's mind. What's going through the person's mind is, I have no choice. You're not giving me a choice. And in so many ways, we talked about this, so many ways in our own Judaism, we have this, that certain things are threatened with our Judaism. We don't have a choice, right? So Going to work on Shabbos or going to work on Yontif. You took off the whole month of Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they all fell out on Monday and Tuesday, or what, right? And what? But there's no choice. I'm not going to work. It's not an option. It's not like I have an option. The same thing is with putting on tefillin, for instance, right? For many, many Jews, it's not an option not to put on tefillin or Shabbos or kosher. Each one of us in our own way. And for somebody, it's not marrying out, right? That marrying out of the faith, it's not even an option. We each have this red line that we wouldn't cross about Judaism. That's our netzach. That's our stubbornness about our Yiddishkeit. That's our stubbornness about our Judaism. That victory that we're going to do this no matter at all costs, right? Gary, like you said before about davening. Just because we're not going to shul on Shabbos, it doesn't mean we're not davening on Shabbos. Right? Just because we're not going to shul doesn't mean we're not going to learn Torah. There are certain things that we're going to do because we're Jewish, and this is what we do. This is who we are. There is no other option. That's Mesiras Nefesh. And that, the Rebbe says, is the primary way of serving Hashem today. And he goes at length that in the times of Beis Hamikdash, we had other things going for us. First of all, we're able to see godliness. He says today in exile, we can't see anything. We can't see godliness at all. It's like sleeping in Galus and exile. We're sleeping. The primary way of telling if somebody's sleeping or not is you see if their eyes are closed, because the primary function that ceases when somebody sleeps is our ability to see. So we're in exile. We can't see anything. We can't see godliness, which is a huge difference between the times of the Beis Hamikdash and today. Not only that, he says, but even what we understand of godliness. So in the times of the Beis Hamikdash was like you were awake. You have discernment. You're able to analyze and understand, comprehend. The way we are in exile is we also understand, but our understanding is like when you're sleeping. The way you understand in your sleep, in your dream, is incomparable to the way you understand when you're awake. The discernment is not there. You're not able to critically think and stuff. So the way we understand in Galus is like somebody sleeping compared to the way they understood in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, he says, is because we can't see godliness, because we can't see godliness, because we can't understand godliness properly. So also we can't have a bittul, a feeling for Hashem. We can't have our ava and yira, love for Hashem, and a fear for Hashem like they had then. And therefore you can also have the bittul, the nullification, the selflessness to Hashem that they were able to have in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. So what do we have going for ourselves? What we have today is netzach, Mesiras Nefesh, that determination that no matter what happens and at all costs, we're going to do what Hashem wants. As we saw time and time again throughout our history, is that no matter what was thrown our way, no matter what situation we found ourselves, we ate matzah on Pesach. We lit the menorah on Hanukkah. We kept on davening, with the Moranos till today. These stories that come out of people that have these candles and in fireplaces and lifting them up. So that the incredible Mesiras Nefesh that we've had. No matter what happens, we're gonna continue doing it. We're gonna continue keeping Torah mitzvahs. We're gonna continue being Jewish. It's almost like you think about it as we've proven ourselves in every single way that no matter what happens, in good times and in better times, right? No matter what happens, we're gonna keep this. We're gonna learn. We're gonna daven. We're gonna do mitzvahs. We're gonna be Jewish, and that's what's going for us today. And that's how he concludes this chapter 2 or Perek 2, the second paragraph, the second chapter of this Maimer, is that even those who are very intellectual and have a deep understanding, you must put your seichel, you must put your mind to the side. You can't follow reason anymore. If you're going to follow reason, it's possible that we'll get farblunges, we'll get turned off for the right path, we'll get lost. Today, we have to have Mesiras Nefesh. We have to have the determination, as he says, to follow the Shulchan Aruch, to follow the Code of Jewish Law, and not to deviate even like a kutzei shel yud, not even like the point of a yud, which is the smallest measurement possible, smallest thing possible. Not to deviate from the Shulchan Aruch in ayot, even a drop. Why? Not because of our understanding and learning and reasoning, But because of Mesiras Nefesh, there's no other option. I have to keep to what Hashem wants. That, he says, is our avodah today. That's a primary way of serving Hashem today, is our stubbornness, as we're all doing, as we said in this isolation that we're in right now. That's what we're all doing right now, is that we're isolated, and yet we're stubbornly keeping it. We're still davening, we're still learning, we're still putting on our tefillin, we're still educating our children.
But isn't this time of the modern time, let's say the last 100 years, isn't that the time where the greatest percentage of Jews are not doing that? In other words, in generations past, they followed Shulchan Aruch. They lived a Jewish life. They lived an observant Jewish life. There wasn't this kind of, secular assimilation and things of that nature. That's why I don't understand. I mean, I understand that that's what we have to do now more than ever, but it's like now more than ever, the overall Jewish world is the opposite.
Very good. It's a very good question. Very, very good question.
But that being said, all these people that you're talking about, what's their main concern now that we're in isolation? Oh, how are we going to have a Seder with our family? We're not going to be able to. These are people that don't even, they'll order in non-kosher for a Seder, but just the thought that they're not going to have a Seder. So it's just a matter of the degree, but they're still Jewish. Now, how do they get to that next level? There's the question.
That is beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you. It's always good with a dad mixes in like that. It makes my job a little easier.
Well, I'm old. I'm wise today. It's my birthday today.
And your second class already. Oh, Mazel Tov.
Yeah, so I'm an elderly.
The Rebbe says that on your birthday you should learn extra Gemara, extra Nigla, and extra Chassidus. So
I've already done my first Daf Yomi and Tilm this morning and davening, and then I got tonight and this one. So
there you go. So but to add to what your father said, we have to understand is that the famous Maimonides, the Rambam, that says that a person that he talks about all the restrictions and the way you treat a Jew who's forsaken Judaism, who becomes a mummer and forsake Judaism. And there's some harsh laws that apply to these people in Torah. But then he points out like this, and he says, who does this apply to? This applies only to people that have grown up with it, have lived it, have understood it, and then they gave it up. Those people, you can hold them accountable, and Hashem can hold them accountable for not keeping the Torah mitzvahs properly. But he says, but what about their grandchildren or their students who didn't know any better? So he says it's just like a Jewish child that was been captured by non-Jews, and he grew up in a non-Jewish environment, right? So his whole upbringing has been no kosher, he didn't know anything about it. Not only that, he says, even as this guy grows older and he finds out about Shabbos and he finds out about kosher, you still can't hold him accountable, because you can't compare somebody who grew up with all this stuff with somebody who didn't grow up with it at all. So I think we have to really take that into account when we talk about these subjects. It's called, again, Tinik Shenishba. You probably heard the term Tinik Shenishba. It's like a Tinik Shenishba, like a child that was abducted, that was kidnapped among anti-Semites, right? So what's the point? The point is that the lack of Torah and mitzvahs by most people today is not their fault at all. You can't hold them accountable for it at all. It's not their fault, because that's what they grew up with. So essentially, they're not held accountable for any of the sins that they do, or at least not those, right? Not keeping Torah mitzvahs properly, they're not held accountable for it. They don't know any better. At the same time, as your father pointed out, you see these Jews, and they're strongly Jewish. They have that thing. They have that red line they won't cross about their Judaism. For some, it's further. For some, it's right. But like so many of these people, right? They'll deny everything Judaism, everything about Yiddishkeit. They won't believe in Torah and God and anything, right? But they'll never deny that they're Jewish, for instance. It's part of who they are. Where's that coming from? There's still something in themselves with this, which is stubbornly Jewish. And I told this, I think I told this last week or a couple weeks. The guy, there was a guy who grew up Chassidic, and he wrote a whole article about he didn't believe in anything. He didn't believe in Torah, didn't believe in God, didn't believe in the history of the Jew. Right? He ends up this whole art like how does he lying to his kids because he's growing up in the Park Williamsburg. I don't know where he was. Anyway, at the end of this article, he writes, but Jewish, but how Jewish he is. And you think about like what makes you Jewish? You don't believe in God, you don't believe in Torah, you don't believe in anything, right? And yet he's stubbornly Jewish. And we have most Jews today have this idea. There's something that they will not let go. Like your father said, most Jews today, right? Their biggest thing on their mind is how am I going to make a Seder? That's crazy. It's an incredible thing, right? That they have to have a Seder with everything that's going on. What goes last? So sports is gone, right? Going out to theaters is gone. All this fun and stuff that's all gone. What's left? There's one thing I can't give up: my Seder. I have to have my matzah. That's an incredible thing. That's a testimony for the stubbornness of a Jew, for that Mesiras Nefesh of a Jew. Someone else ask something? So that's what we all have it. We all have it to a certain extent. The more you grow up with the Yiddishkeit or the more the Baal Tshuva and everything, you have it with the red line you pushed further. So for you, it's not walking into a McDonald's. For you, it's not skipping a tefillin, right? But for these other Jews, there's something in their Judaism that they do. There's again, there's no other option for them. Not having a Seder, it's not an option. Now, they might have it at 4:00 in the afternoon, which is not really it doesn't necessarily count all that well, right? So again, but that's because they just don't know better, right? But the idea is that there is no other option. And this is the main thing that we do today. If we want to enhance our avodas Hashem, if you want to serve Hashem better today, the primary focus should be on making things that there's no other option for it. So like a great example of that is our learning Torah. For most people, or I don't say most, but a lot of people in this world, is the set time that we have for learning Torah is a second or third priority. If I've got to go to work, if I got to have an important meeting, whatever it is, that takes first. If I'm hungry, that takes second, right? My third thing is, if nothing else, I'll do my shir Torah. But that's not the way it should be. Our learning Torah should be no other option. Netzach, not because we enjoy it, not because it's exciting, not because it's fun, but because Mesiras Nefesh is the primary way of serving Hashem today. Doing what we have to do with determination, with no other option. It's my time to learn Torah. There's not. The Rebbe would put it as it's Shabbos right now. On Shabbos I don't answer the phone. On Shabbos I don't. Right now it's Shabbos, and you tell your kids, I'm sorry. Right now I'm Torah. The Rebbe said this to say to your kids, right now I am Torah. Right now I'm Torah. There's no. You can't disturb me right now. And that's the Mesiras Nefesh, the determination we're talking about. That's the main thing that we do today in Golus, in exile. That's the main way we serve Hashem. Is again putting our reason to the side, not following Hashem because it makes sense, not following Hashem because it's reasonable and it's fun and it's exciting and it's enjoyable, but following the Torah and following Hashem. Why? Because there's no other option. Nitzachim, victory. I have to do this. This is me, and there's no other. There's no other way. I hope that answers your question.
Hey, Rebbe, can you hear me?
I hear you. Who's this?
My name is Kenneth, sir, and I'm going through the process of conversion, and I'm just listening to what you're saying. With all due respect, there is no other way. And I thank my brother Yisrael Boykin for referring me to you, and thank you for your words. There is no other way for me. Either I do this or I die. And it's very challenging, especially with this time, because I don't know what I'm doing. But thank you for your encouraging words, because there is no other way. And to listen to all these people who keep who observe their faith and are dedicated to it, it inspires me and knows that there's resources out there for me to reach out to. And I thank everyone who's listening to this message for what they're doing, and just you're an encouragement keep on doing what you're doing. And just thank you, Rebbe, and thank you all for participating in this.
Thank you. And thank you, Yisrael. You've been on, I think you upped our attendance today by quite a bit. Thanks.
When there is a wellspring of Hasidus that's being opened by our teacher, sometimes there's a geographical holdback and you can't make it, or there's something that holds you back. But in this method, if you're not on this call, you're not living, you know what I mean? Please continue.
Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. All right, so let's continue with the mimer. What's the next part of the mimer? He's going to now explain why is it that, number one, why specifically in exile is this idea of netzach the most important thing, this idea of victory of Mesiras Nefesh. And number two, he's going to explain why this is a forerunner for the coming of Mashiach. So let me just share my screen here so that we can all follow along. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, it's here. Okay, this should be it. Okay, so here's the mimer on the screen. Can everybody see it?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to start from Gimel. So let me get a, how do I?
Gimel. That stands for Getzel.
Spotlight. Whatever. Is that what I want? There we go. Okay, so there we go. Starting from Gimel, what is he going to say? He said, first of all, how come in exile we don't have anything else, but we do have this netzach, this victory. And what he's going to say is because netzach, this idea of victory, this idea of Mesiras Nefesh, where does it come from? Where does it stem from? It stems from the essence of our soul. And because it comes from the very essence of our soul, nothing could hold it, nothing could cancel it out. Nothing, oops, I just messed it up. Nothing could, what did I just do? One time. Nothing could, spotlight. Okay, so nothing could interfere with it, and therefore even and nothing can conceal it. So that's why even when the time of exile, we can't see Hashem, and we can't feel Hashem, we can't experience Hashem the way we and understand Hashem the way we were in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. But what we could still do, we can still have Mesiras Nefesh. Why? Because nothing can conceal that, because it's the essence of our soul, and nothing can conceal the essence of our soul. That's what we continue here. V'hinei hatam al zeh. The reason for this, that the concealment that happens in exile, including the concealment that happens in the times of the heels of Mashiach, which he concluded the last paragraph, the last chapter. He concluded saying is that especially when we're talking about in the heels of Mashiach, we're at the very lowest in our history. And the concealment of godliness is at the greatest right now. Even then, it can only conceal on our intellect, but it cannot conceal on our netzach. It only conceals on our inner abilities of our soul, our inner powers, our inner abilities, like our mind, our seeing, our experiencing. But the concealment can't have any effect, can't conceal whatsoever on our netzach. Mevar ba maimer, so he explains in the maimer why shezel lefi shesherish hanetzach hu be'etzem hanefesh. The source of this stubbornness, the source of victory that I have to win at all costs, that I'm willing to give everything and give up everything for Hashem. Where does it come from? The very essence of our soul. It comes from the very essence of our soul. To Kamaikeinu Lamaila, the same thing would apply. Lamaila would apply in heaven. That also in the Sfirot, in the levels, the attributes, the way they are by Hashem, you have that same idea. Is that the source, the root for Netzach, the root of this level of Netzach, of victory, where is it rooted? In Pnimius HaKeser, in the inner part of the crown. And the inner part of the crown, there's not possible to have any change. What is this crown? So for a little bit of again, a little bit of an introduction, you have 10 sfirot. In Kabbalah and Hasidus, Hashem creates the world through 10 levels, through 10 sfirot. Started with Chachma, with wisdom and understanding, and goes down to love, fear, or for Hashem, it's kindness and severity, all the way to Malchus, to kingship. Now, beyond it, beyond these 10 levels, you have the crown, the Keser. The difference between a crown and the 10 sfirot is that the 10 sfirot are internal. They come down into a chain link of events. They come down into a system that Hashem uses to create the world. The crown, just like a crown is above our heads, the same thing, the crown of Hashem, so to speak, is above the internal system. It's beyond the system. It's a crown above the head. It's a crown, it's above and beyond the system of creation. But in the crown itself, you have two parts to it. In the crown, as it says by the Arizal says, the crown is actually an intermediary, so to speak. It's not an intermediary, is the wrong word for it, but it's it's in between Hashem and Atzilus, between Hashem and the beginning of the system of creation. What does that mean? That Keser is two parts. The crown is two parts. The higher part of the crown is the lowest level of Hashem, so to speak. And the lower part of the crown is the first of the system of creation. So you have what's called in Chassidus Atik and Arich. Atik means it is completely removed. It's the higher level of the crown, which is completely removed from creation. It's the lowest level, so to speak, in Hashem. And the second part of the crown, which is Arich, is the beginning of the system. To put it in other words, and we're going to have kind of this idea in the next chapter as well, that there's really three stages. There's really three stages in creation. You have Hashem, then you have His light, but in His light you have two parts to it. You have the light, the way it comes out on its own, where it's just completely connected to Him, and it's beyond anything, anything in creation. But then what happens is He has to take that light and bring it down into a vessel. The vessels are Atzilus. The vessels are the different attributes that Hashem has. But in order to bring the light down into the vessel, the light itself has to change to become able to go down into the vessel. The light of Hashem itself is too strong. It's too powerful to come down to any vessel. So you have to have tzimtzum. You have to contract and limit that light so in order to come down into the vessel. So this light has two parts to it. The light has the way it is beyond the system, meaning the way it's still connected to Hashem, and therefore it's too powerful to come down into the vessel. And then there is the way that Hashem takes His infinite light and makes it enables it to come down into the vessel. But at that point, it's still not in the vessel. The light is still beyond the vessel, but it's limited enough that now it could come down to the vessel, and then it comes down into the vessel. So there were three parts there. Number one is the way the light is connected to Hashem, which is beyond the creation at all. There's then the way that Hashem takes that light, diminishes it, limits it to enable it to go down into the vessel. And then number three is that when it goes into the vessel itself. So these two levels of light, the way it is connected to Hashem beyond the vessel, and the way that the light becomes limited and Hashem enables it to come down to the vessel, are these two levels of the crown. The higher level of the crown is the way the light is still connected to Hashem. It's so infinite that it can't come down into any vessel. But then there is the way that the light is limited and finite in order to, or at least it enables it to come down to the vessel. That is the lower level of Keser. That's lower level of the crown. And what he's explaining here is that the level of Netzach, the level of victory, which is you have Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach. About the seventh level of the system of these 10 attributes of Hashem. That seventh one is directly connected to the inner part of the crown. It's directly connected to the part of the crown. That's why it will win at all costs, because it's connected to the very essence of the soul. So it's determined to win at all costs. And then he explains that this inner part of the crown, there is no change. The light that is connected directly to Hashem doesn't change. It doesn't have moods. It doesn't change based on time and space and everything. It's beyond everything. It's non-changing. It cannot change. And because this part, this Pnimius HaKeser, the inner part of the crown, doesn't change, and because victory is rooted in that Pnimius HaKeser, so a little bit of that unchanging aspect of the crown is also in Netzach, that's also unchanging. So even though it's a much, much lower level, it's much lower than intellect, it's even lower than our emotions, it's much lower than that, but yet it has that determination. Why? Because it's rooted into the very essence of our soul. And it's the same thing with Hashem. Hashem's Netzach is rooted in his again, in his Pnimius HaKeser, and the inner part of the crown doesn't change. And then he quotes a verse that highlights this. As it says in the verse, V'gam Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, the strength of Israel, or the glory of Israel, does not lie, v'lo yinachem, and does not regret, ki lo adam hu linachem, for he's not human to regret. What is the pasuk saying? The story was, this was with Shaul HaMelech, when King Saul had messed up with the Amalekites, and he didn't destroy the Amalekites as he was commanded by Hashem. And Shmuel came and said, "You messed up," right? So he was asking for a second chance, and Shmuel said, "It's too late." Hashem does not change his mind. Hashem does not regret. Or as Rashi puts it, especially when it comes to good, right? If Hashem does something good, he doesn't change it. And because Hashem had already promised somebody else, King David, that he's going to be the king, it's already too late to change. Because Hashem is not going to change his mind no longer. Why? So what does the verse say? He doesn't regret. Why? Ki loy adamhu, for he's not human. Linachim, to regret. Hashem is not human. A human decides one day this, and the next day he changes his mind. So Shmuel tells Shaul, but Hashem is not human. And therefore, he doesn't just change his mind. If he decides, it's decided, and nothing can change him. Like we said, Pnimius HaKeser does not change. But here's the way that Chassidus explains that. Instead of reading it for he's not human, he does, and therefore he does not regret. Kiloi Adam, who means he's not even the supernal human. The 10 sfirot, the 10 attributes of Hashem, is the supernal human. They're called Adam HaElyon, the man above. Like we say, like as for instance, we're created in Hashem's image, right? We're created in Hashem's image. So many interpret that to mean is, what's Hashem's image? That Hashem made an image for himself in the 10 sfirot of Atzilut. He made of these 10 attributes, and we're created with those same 10 attributes. But then there is the crown. The crown is Lo Yadam. It's beyond man. It's beyond human. In other words, not just that Hashem is not human in the physical sense, but in Hashem himself, there is the human aspect of him, so to speak, and there is the non-human aspect. In Atzilos, over there you can have change. Hashem could, so to speak, change his mind in the world of Atzilos. If Chesed of Atzilos decides, if Hashem decides something in Chesed of Atzilos, he can change it because that's human. That's the human aspect of Hashem. It's the supernal human. It's a supernal man. But when it comes to Lo Yadam, when something reaches Keser, then nothing can change. Nothing can change it. And that's what he continues saying. The Inyan Anachama Vashinoy, regret and change, Shayich Rak B'Chinas Adam. That can only happen in a level of man. In the supernal man, that can happen. Ishtalshalos, which means the system, the chain link of existence. In the system of creation, over there, change can happen. Hashem can decide that he's going to bring a coronavirus, and the next moment, as every rest of Frisco kid, and just like that, he can change his mind and just remove the whole thing as fast as it came. Hashem in a moment's time can change it all. Hashem can change his mind as long as it's in Hishtalshalos, it's in the system, in the creation. So Hashem can change it. But because the netzach, this victory of Hashem, this level of netzach by Hashem reaches the level of lo yadam, it's rooted in keser, in the crown, which is lo yadam, which is beyond the human, which is beyond the supernal man, which he says there is l'mayla mishtalshalos, beyond the chain link of existence, beyond the system. Lachein ein shayich b'shinoi, there is no change there. It's not possible to change. And the same thing is with our netzach. Our netzach is, we have netzach today because it's a non-changing thing. No matter what happens, no matter where we are, it's rooted in the essence of our soul. And just like our essence can't change, the same thing, our netzach, doesn't change it as well. The Yeshnoi Begilui, and it is found and revealed, Gam Bisman Agolus, even in the times of exile. That also the time of exile, here we are. And as you've said, even in the darkest times of exile, in the greatest concealment of Hashem, so in the great concealment of Golos, of exile, we still have this, and even more, because nothing can change this determination that we have, this netzach, this Mesiras Nefesh that we have for Hashem. And in addition, not only that, but even more than that, Ela shebizman hagolos, in the times of exile, ubefrat beikvise de meshicha, and especially in our times, especially in the darkest times of exile, it's in a much more revealed sense than the times of the Beis Hamikdash. Not only is it the same, not only do we have this netzach, this victory, the way it was in the times of Beis Hamikdash, but we have it today even more. And I guess the reason for that is as long as you could understand, appreciate, and feel, experience Hashem, then you don't need it. You don't need your Mesiras Nefesh. You don't need your self-sacrifice. You're doing it because it's exciting. You're doing it because you believe in it. You're doing it because it makes sense. And therefore, it ends up concealing your Mesiras Nefesh, your determination. But when that's all gone, you can't see Hashem. You can't see the miracles of Hashem. You can't recognize and understand Hashem the way, and you can't have the feelings for Hashem the way you had in the past. Then what happens then? This victory comes out in its full sense. Another example of this might be is the Baal Shem Tov held very highly of the simple Jew, the simplicity of the simple Jew. But why does the simple Jew have such simplicity? Why does he have simple faith? Because he doesn't understand. Because he's not so sophisticated like the great scholar, what happens? His faith is much stronger. Because of the simplicity. When somebody learns a lot and knows a lot, right? Especially in today's time and age, the more you know, the more you learn, right? Everything becomes complicated, right? My uncle puts it about one of his things, that's right. You ask a guy if he believes in God, he says that's too sophisticated for me. Ask my rabbi, right? It shouldn't be a sophisticated thing. It should be simple. God exists. We talk to him. He takes care of us, and so on and so forth. But what happens? We learn this opinion, we learn that, we learn science, we learn this. The more we study, the more complicated things become. And then we lose that simplicity, that simple faith in Hashem. We lose that simple praying to Hashem. On the other hand, the simple Jew doesn't know anything. He doesn't know that there's any theological or philosophical questions about godliness. He doesn't know any of that stuff. All he knows is his parents told him that there's a God. He believes it, and therefore he prays to him and he believes in him. It's simple faith. Like a child. A child doesn't know any better. As my uncle once said, is you walk over to somebody with simple faith and you go over to him, you tell him, "Wow, it's amazing you have such simple faith in God. You just ruined it." The whole point of simple faith means he doesn't even realize there's something great about it. He doesn't even realize that there's something to be excited about, that he has that's the definition of simple faith, is that simplicity. But why? Because he doesn't have the sophistication of the intellect and understanding. That's why the simplicity comes out much stronger. And the same thing is in the times of Golus, when you're talking about that Mesiras Nefesh. When you don't need self-sacrifice, you don't see it. In the times when things are good and things are wonderful and you see godliness and you go to the Beis Hamikdash and you see 10 miracles going on a constant basis and you have these great teachers and these prophets talking directly to Hashem, I don't need Mesiras Nefesh to keep Torah and mitzvahs. You know, my next door neighbor has conversations with God back and forth. It's much easier to appreciate Judaism, right? But you're talking about at a time when you don't have that. And you can't just walk to the Beis Hamikdash and see a pillar of smoke go straight up, even though it's raining and windy and everything, and you're outdoors, right? As the weather now is in Toronto, the fire's going straight up as right? You go and you see that. It's not very difficult to serve Hashem. But on the other, then it comes a time when you don't see those miracles. That's when Mesiras Nefesh, that's when it comes out. And that's why in Russia, for instance, in communist Russia, right? That's why in communist Russia, that's where you see much more Mesiras Nefesh, much more self-sacrifice than you did in the good old times. Why? Because there was more concealment, The more the concealment was, the more you need Mesiras Nefesh, the more you need self-sacrifice. And as the Rebbe says, is today it's even harder. In the good times to have Mesiras Nefesh, sometimes even harder, because when you're compelled to have it, it forces you to have Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice. Today, in the good days of America, in a sense, it's even harder. As Rebbe would say that there's many Jews that they had Mesiras Nefesh. You saw the Mesiras Nefesh in Russia, but today you don't see it as much. But the idea again is that specifically in our times is when Mesiras Nefesh, the self-sacrifice for Hashem, comes out even stronger, comes out even more. Why? Because you don't have the intellect, the sophistication that conceals over that Mesiras Nefesh. So all you have left is that netzach, that victory, and that's what we have that the most revealed today, even more than the times of the Beis Hamikdash. That makes sense?
Rebbe, I'm confused because with all due respect, well, let me ask you a question, because I'm thinking, like, as I go through this whole process, the more I learn, the more I believe Hashem is going to demand of me, and so it doesn't. Are you talking about in terms of a simple? I'm kind of confused because when you say like a simple faith, are you just talking? I believe there's Hashem, undoubtedly, but I think maybe sometimes I lose my, I guess, faith, for lack of a better word, because I think Hashem demands more out of me. That's what my faith, because as I study more, I believe Hashem demands more out of me, and so when I don't, it's kind of uncanny, and I can't explain it, but my faith can wither because I don't feel I maybe not meeting the standards that I should have, if that makes any kind of sense.
So your faith shouldn't wither from that. That doesn't just because you're not doing your standards. That should minimize. That should lessen your faith in yourself, not faith in Hashem. He's not doing anything wrong. But the idea is that today that's the big challenge. The big challenge of studying is the more you study, the harder it is to have faith. And the real challenge is that your studying should be done in the proper way that it increases faith. That's the challenge, because the more sophisticated we become, the more we know, the more we understand, the more it conceals that simple faith in God. And that's why the Baal Shem Tov would tell his greatest scholars, his greatest students, he would say, you have to learn from the simple people, because all your learning and all your studying and everything, the real goal that you're trying to accomplish is to reach the simplicity of the simple Jew. Now, if you're able to study and you don't, that's a crime. That's a bigger crime. Just because studying, right? You have to study. It's a mitzvah that we have to study as much as we can. But we have to remember what the goal is. That the goal of studying is to almost like to make our mind not get in the way. As opposed to trying to figure everything out, the main point of studying is to try to get our mind out of the way and get back to the simplicity of a child, to get back to the simplicity of that simple faith. And that's why the way we study and the attitude we have when you study it makes a very, very big difference. That's why before we study, we make sure to say a blessing on the Torah, because how we study makes the world of a difference. Because otherwise, it just inflates our ego. It can make us learning Torah, right? We should do it anyway, even if it does this. But it can inflate our ego. It can make us more distant from Hashem. That's the danger of study, right? And therefore, we have to study properly. One of the big things is saying a blessing before it, recognizing this is Hashem's Torah. Another thing about studying is when you study, to have in mind that I'm studying Hashem's Torah. I'm not just studying my own thing.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mo, you want to ask something?
Yeah, not ask. So when we say Hashem, can turn things off, like the coronavirus, bring it on, and then all of a sudden change his mind, it really reflects the bina of that you're talking about of man, because we don't see Hashem come down and just change things. It's not a physical seeing of Hashem, but rather it's the bina that he gives to man to make that change. Isn't that more what we're saying?
So if I understand you correctly, right? If I understand correctly, there's two different ways of using our mind. So one way of using our mind is to try to figure everything out, right? To make sense of everything, to figure out everything. And what the Rebbe is saying, generally speaking, today's day and age, that's not really healthy. Our minds are not capable as capable. It's like Maimonides when he talks about his guide to the perplexed, right? When he talks about his guide to the perplexed and everything, right? So many people didn't study it, right? Or if they would study the answer, and only afterwards the question. There's a lot of on Jewish philosophy, and a lot of the rabbis banned the study of the Guide to the Perplexed for a very long time, because you have to be very careful when you start studying these things. You're going to start asking questions about free choice. Start asking questions about, does God really exist? Everything, right? So if you're in Maimonides and if you're these great rabbis and these great minds, so then you're okay, because you'll figure out the truth and you'll, right? But what happens to people like, I can talk for myself, people like me, right? It can bring in doubts. Why? Because I'm not as smart as these people, and therefore, what ends up happening is that these questions, they start niggling at my mind, and it could bring doubts in my faith. Why? Because it's not true. Because what my mind is, no, it's because I don't have the mind like Maimonides to get. And he talks about that. Is you got to be really careful about studying these things. Is because you might not get the point as well as he got it. I'm not as smart as him. So learning in that sense and trying to figure things out, and does God really exist, and science and everything, it can be a very dangerous thing, because we don't all have the mental capacity to, you just look at blogs on, you look at comments on blogs, and you can see people's mental capacity of understanding things and being discernment and the crazy stuff that people write about, especially when it comes to religion and things like this and belief in God. It's crazy. It's insane what's out there, right? But for many people, it's a big problem. And then you start reading these things, and the doubts start coming in. Not because you don't have the answers, because you're not smart enough that you understand it properly. So that's not good. That type of studying, generally speaking today, that's not good. Now, the other type of studying is studying to know God's Torah, studying to know and to be able to, bring people closer to Judaism. That type of studying where you're not asking, is it true? Is it not true? Right? And I think that's what you mean is, so that the bina that we have, that we're using our intellect, what are we trying to do? We're trying to understand Torah, we're trying to understand Chassidus, it's almost like a great example of this is, they say the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, and Maimonides were very similar in various ways. And one of the big things is they both wrote two very important books, one on halacha, right? So the Rambam wrote the Mishnah Torah, the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch, and as well on philosophy, or theology, whatever it's called. Or the Maimonides wrote the Guide to Perplexed, and the Alter Rebbe wrote Shar Yichud Ve'emunah. He wrote the Tanya. The second part of the Tanya talks about the oneness of Hashem. But the Chassidim would say, but there's a very big difference between Maimonides and the Alter Rebbe. Maimonides begins with, is there a God or not? Is there free choice or not? Is it true or not? What does the Alter Rebbe begin with? He begins with, God exists. Now, you have to figure out how he's one and what does that mean? Or better even, the Alter Rebbe says that God exists. Now you have to figure out, does the world really exist? Does it not really exist? You're starting about a whole different thing. And that's the difference in the bina, the bina of what Maimonides kind of goes, the path that he leads, and the way that Chassidus goes. You can take the way of Maimonides and try to figure it all out. Does God really exist? Does not really exist? But that can lead to who knows where. Or you could take the path of the Alter Rebbe. God exists. Now we just got to figure out, do we exist? Do we not exist? And you think about it, we just celebrated, had a couple of days ago was the Yartzeit of Rebbe Rashab, the Fifth Chabad Rebbe, and he started the Yeshiva Temchet Minmin, Lubavitch Yeshiva, just over 100 years ago, in 1896, 97. And one of the big things that they incorporated in this yeshiva was to learn Chassidus. And all of a sudden you had people, when the isms were so incredibly, they were changing everything in the world at that time. In science is becoming the new religion and all these kind of things. And yet you had these boys learning in this yeshiva. And what were they learning about? How God is one and nothing else exists and everything. And the faith that these people had, not because they try to figure out does God really exist or not, but they try to figure out is how do we exist in this whole picture? God is here and I have a soul. And you learn this stuff and the incredible faith that these people had. And that continues, that in Chabad and in the world in general, that was inspired by this yeshiva, where they lived through everything in communist Russia, we mentioned before, right? The main people that gave their lives for it and they kept Yiddishkeit alive were these boys learning in this yeshiva Tem Chachamim. Why? Because they weren't asking, does God exist or not? They were asking what do I do about it? God does exist. And that's what they talked about and learned and studied for 4 hours a day, is about God existing and God's components and his attributes and his tzimtzum and his kav and all the things that we learn in Chassidus. When you start learning, that's the learning of today. The learning of today shouldn't be to try to figure out if Judaism is true or not. Right? The learning should be is if God exists, then what is expected of me? Taking that's a whole different bina, that's a whole different understanding. It's a whole different, does that make sense? I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but. Yeah, Mo?
I think the tangent I was heading on was more about people, when we hear, God can turn it on, God can turn it off. I was saying that he gives us the knowledge to turn it off with, giving the ability for Adam to do it. And you got the doctors that figure it out. Without him giving them the knowledge, there would be no off. And is what I'm interpreting it.
So good. But what you said is, so the Bina, what are the doctor's job? The doctor's job is to figure out how we can cure this thing.
And where does that come from? From the knowledge that Hashem gives the doctor.
But those people that try to figure out why it's happening,
no,
that's already crazy. It's happening because we're doing this. It's happening because of that. It's happening because we're not doing Torah mitzvahs. I mean, who are you to? That's what I mean is that the bina that we use is okay. So what do you want me to do now? What does God want me to do now about it? But to figure out why it's happening. That's very good. Let's just we're a little bit over time here, but let's just finish with this paragraph, if you don't mind. And V'yesh Leimar, the way he concludes here is, and the point that it brings out with all this is, this all started with explaining why do we need a king? Why do we need Mashiach as a king? If everybody's going to recognize godliness, if the whole world is going to be transformed, and even the lamb is going to lie with the wolf, then what do we need a king for? And he said is because Mashiach is going to give us a transcendent experience of godliness. But then the Rebbe said that we prepare for this in the times of exile. How do we prepare for this in the times of exile? That's what he explains this whole thing of Netzach. Because you're serving Hashem with Netzach, you're serving Hashem with victory, with Mesiras Nefesh, and this reaches this essence of your soul. And the same thing is in Hashem. It reaches the inner part of the crown, which is a transcendent light. So by serving Hashem with Netzach, by serving Hashem with victory, by serving Hashem with this determination, which is beyond reason, what are you doing? You're preparing yourself and you're preparing the world for what Mashiach is all about. That he's going to give you a transcendent experience of Hashem. So when you stubbornly serve Hashem, you stubbornly keep the Torah and mitzvahs, even though when you're not interested and you're not understanding, it doesn't make sense to you, and you stubbornly keep to it. What are you doing? You're preparing yourself that when Mashiach comes, you can have a stubborn revelation of godliness, that you're not worthy of it, you don't understand it, you're not at that level, and he's going to give it to you anyway. Why? Because you served Hashem the same way a year ago, before Mashiach came. Because your whole life you served Hashem that way. You served Hashem stubbornly with going beyond your reason. So Hashem is going to give you through Mashiach as a king. He's going to give you which is beyond your reason. He's going to give you a transcendent experience of godliness, an experience which is beyond anything you could imagine. Why? Because that's how you served Hashem. That's how you serve Hashem. That's how you are preparing for Mashiach, because you're serving Hashem in that same way. And that's what he concludes with this paragraph in chapter 3. V'yesh Leimar, he says, that this which the Friedrich, right, in his Maimer explains at great length. In the source, in the root of Netzach, of this victory, Hugam, it's not just to explain why we have it in exile, but also to explain Levar Atamos Shagil Los Lavi but Davke. To also explain why. Why is it that the way we serve Hashem today is a preparation for when Mashiach comes? And he explains like this. Being that the service of Hashem in the times of exile is in a way of victory, of determination, of beyond reason. And we said before, and the source of Netzach comes from the inner part of the crown. And he quotes here a verse from Tehillim Bechinas, Yashes Cheshech Sisrei. Yashes mean that Hashem is in darkness. As it says in Chassidus, which is higher than Revelation, that if you go to the very essence, the essence doesn't go anywhere. The essence stays where it is. So when you have the essence of light, what is the essence of light? It stays where it is, so it's really dark. It doesn't, light is a spashtus. Light means that something is coming out, is emanating from it, is shining from it. What is the essence of the sun? The essence of the sun is dark. The essence of light is dark. When a candle goes out, it goes back to its source. The light goes back, fire goes back, it becomes dark. Because the essence of revelation is really darkness. Because the deeper you get to the essence of everything, the darker it gets. Because again, the essence doesn't go anywhere. The essence is stationary. It's non-changing. Non-changing means it's always the same. It doesn't move. If it doesn't move, it's so the essence of Hashem also, so to speak, is really darkness. Hashem is in darkness, but not in absence of light. Hashem is in darkness, which is the essence of light. I think a black hole might be like that. What's a black hole? It's so much energy that it imploded on itself that it takes in everything. It's not a lack of light that's in a black hole. It's actually so much of it that it's bringing it in instead of letting it out. That's what essence is. The essence is the darkness beyond the light. And therefore, when we have Netzach, when we have this victory, what are we reaching? We are reaching darkness beyond light. Now, the same thing is in ourselves. In ourselves, we also have darkness, but we can have darkness below light, or you can have darkness beyond light. Darkness below light is I don't understand. I'm clueless. I am clueless, so I'm in darkness. But you can also have darkness beyond light. How does the famous saying go? The Alter Rebbe quote, I think it's from Sadi Goin, if I'm not mistaken, is that the greatest knowledge of Hashem is knowing that I know nothing. Right? That when you get to the greatest understanding of Hashem, what do you realize? I know absolutely nothing. So at the very lowest, at the cluelessness, is that I don't know anything about godliness. I don't know anything about anything, right? And then you start studying and I know more, and I know more, and I know more, and I know more, and I'm more and more and more. And then all of a sudden I get to a point where all of a sudden I realize is that everything I know, I don't know anything. But it's different than the cluelessness. Cluelessness means I know nothing because I didn't know anything. I just don't know anything. But then there is the knowledge that comes beyond, the darkness which is beyond, which means I know so much that I realize I don't know anything. That's why the greatest geniuses, they're much more humble, at least they should be, than most of us. Why? Because with all their knowledge, they realize that with the universe and everything, we think we know how the universe runs because we're a bunch of amateurs. We think we know how the world was created. We think we know everything because we just know nothing, right? Then you have the real Einsteins of the world, and they're so humbled. Why? Because they realize that everything that they know, they haven't even touched the surface. They have no clue about what's going on. We think we know what's going on. The greatest knowledge is not knowing anything, but that's darkness, which is beyond light. The darkness which just transcends light. And therefore, when we serve Hashem, when the darkness, which is below light, we serve Hashem in Netzach with victory without reason because we don't have a clue, because we don't understand anything. We don't have the miracles of the Beis Hamikdash. We don't see, we don't know nothing. But we serve Hashem that way. What are we attaining? What are we reaching? We are reaching beyond reason, the darkness which is beyond light, because Netzach, this level of Netzach is rooted in the essence of the soul. Through the service of exile, which is in the time of we're going to be revealed. The revelations of Mashiach's coming. Mashiach will reveal even that which is beyond understanding, even that which is beyond seeing godliness, which is even greater than the comprehension and the seeing of Mashiach, which is going to be an incredibly great level. Mashiach is going to give us even more than that. Why? Because you served Hashem beyond your reason. Because you served Hashem in your darkness, and you stubbornly kept the Torah mitzvahs. So Hashem is going to do the same thing to you and give you stuff that you have no way of understanding, no way of comprehending, beyond your intellect, beyond your everything. But the way that Mashiach is going to reveal it is in a way of melucha, in a way of being a king canal, said before, in a way of transcendence, because it's going to be talking about something you can't comprehend. He's going to put you in a transcendent thing of Hashem. I want to just conclude quickly, even though, if you don't mind, I hope nobody minds, but I want to conclude what this means in a more practical sense about what is a transcendent experience of Hashem. We talked about it in past classes, but in very, very short. You're trying to convince somebody to become more frum or something, start keeping more Torah mitzvahs. So one way of doing it is you start explaining to them the greatness of Torah and how true it is and everything, which is a step-by-step process, which is using their mind to try to convince them. But then sometimes what you do is you invite them to, let's say, Purim or Simchas Torah and Shul. And the guy walks out and he's completely changed. He's a whole different person. And he starts keeping Torah mitzvahs more than he ever did before. And you wonder, wait, I don't get it. I was explaining to you the beauty of this for 10 months. For 2 years, I've been explaining to you how precious and beautiful Torah mitzvahs is, and I didn't move you. I moved you 3 inches. And you walked one time into shul. Nobody explained anything to you. Nobody walked, and it changed you completely. Now you're all of a sudden on a journey to what happened? The difference is that the first way is an internal way. When you're changing somebody internally, and that's a step-by-step process. That's through understanding, through seeing, which is a very profound impact on us, but it's baby steps. It's finite and limited according to who we are. But when the guy walked into Shul on Simchas Torah, what happened? You weren't explaining it to him in his world. You just lifted him up to your world. You just took him out of his existence and you put him into a whole different existence. That's called a transcendent experience, and it completely changed this guy's life, because a transcendent experience has such a powerful impact on people. That's what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. Besides that, we'll know God better. We'll understand God better. We'll be able to see more of him than we've ever seen in our lifetime, in a way that we can't even comprehend today. Even more than that, he's going to give us such incredibly transcendent experiences that are not going to be Mashiach bringing godliness into our world. He's going to take each and every one of us and lift us up to his world. We won't be able to understand it. We won't be able to see it, to relate to it, but it's going to be life-changing, because it's going to be a transcendent experience of godliness. And again, why is it happening? Because we're out there and we're going to continue doing it. We're going to continue serving Hashem with netzach, with stubbornness, that there is no other option. I'm going to keep on davening. I'm going to keep on putting tefillin, even with all the social distancing and everything. I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep teaching my children, and so on and so forth. Why? Because this is netzach. This is the way we serve Hashem in Golos. And this, of course, is going to bring the coming of Mashiach very soon, where we're going to be able to experience all these things. And it should be, like we said, just like he started this whole thing, it should end it as fast as it came. And we should be able to be already Pesach time with Mashiach.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop the. Well, a quick question for everybody. There's been a request to do it more often during the week. And I realize if we talk about it now, it'll be a little bit easier. Hold on a second. Let me stop share. How do I unlive it?
There you go.